Dark web users of Reddit. Was there ever a point in your use that you felt you were genuinely in danger? What happened? Story 1. About a year ago, I moved into a nice house that my grandpa had built himself. I was in the basement one day. The door was outside the house, like one of those tornado movies. Anyway, there were some plastic containers on the shelves with holes cut into them. There were 4 or 5 of these open crates, and there was hay inside, like there was supposed to be some kind of animal in there, but with no way of keeping it there, since the sides were cut out. I asked my grandpa about it, and he said the previous owners were very paranoid about everything, and almost never paid their rent. Behind one of the top shelf crates, there was a computer, like a full-blown $2,000 computer. I told my grandpa about the computer, and he said the owners skipped town so he couldn't get their contact details to come get it. I took the computer upstairs and plugged it in just to see if it worked. It turned right on. No password. The only icon on the desktop was Tor. For those that don't know, Tor is a browser you can use to access the dark or deep web. The computer had a 4 TB hard drive. I took a brief look into the files. In the video files, there was this massive list of videos, which wasn't unusual until I saw the name of each video. It instantly sent chills throughout my body. One was named Allison, another named Tiffany or something like that. I clicked on one of the videos, hoping it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was a 15-minute video of black screen and no audio. Towards that point, I felt like I was being watched. Although there wasn't a webcam, I don't think I'd ever want to meet the previous owners. Edit, I remembered that the plastic crates' long sides were cut out, so maybe the previous owners slept in the crates, which is eerie in itself, which would explain the hay. Just shows how paranoid the previous owners were. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. Last month, I bought a mystery box from the dark web just for fun. Inside, there were a few butter knives, an old DVD player still in working condition, a doll, and some other random insignificant stuff. I ended up throwing everything away except the DVD player because I had some old CDs I wanted to check. So I connected the DVD player to my TV and got back to work. It was almost 11 o'clock at night. I turned off the TV in the room and went to bed. Around 2 o'clock, I woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen. As I walked past the DVD player, the room was dark, but out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a faint red light coming from it. I got scared, because the DVD player wasn't even plugged in anymore. I quickly turned on the lights, grabbed a screwdriver, and opened up the DVD player to see what was going on. What I found inside was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me. There was a tiny camera with a small battery attached to it. I quickly removed the battery and shoved the camera into a dark box. My first instinct was to call the police, but I decided to wait until morning. The next day, I took the camera to my friend's shop to figure out what kind it was and whether it had recorded anything. It turned out the camera wasn't working. Maybe it broke during shipping, but I learned that this type of camera is designed to record video without sound. It can store up to 24 hours of footage, and the small battery alone can power the camera for about 8 hours when turned on. The camera was set up so that it would automatically start recording whenever the DVD player was plugged in. It was a sick joke, but luckily it failed because of the poor quality of the parts. I was so relieved that the camera broke during shipping. I called the police, documented the whole episode, and then got rid of the camera for good. Story 3. So, I got curious about the dark web and fired up Tor just to explore. I started clicking around thinking, wow, this is really strange. There were listings for drugs, guns, hitmen, and then, out of nowhere, cheese pizza? Like what? All this stuff is seriously messed up. Gun runners, hitmen, you can hire. But where does cheese pizza even fit in with all that? Well, it was even worse than I expected. I clicked on a link, realized what cheese pizza really meant, and immediately shut everything down. I uninstalled Tor and promised myself I'd never go near it again. Then, a police car drove past my house, something that hardly ever happens where I live. I completely crapped myself. It wasn't there for me, but I stayed paranoid for weeks afterward. Story 4. I was an avid dark web user. It wasn't scary considering I knew how to make sure to stay out of trouble and keep secure. But that's only me. You see, when I was browsing the dark web very surface level, no clue how the next part happened. I was on a simple video player that lets me watch shows that have been taken off of, say, Netflix, or shows that aren't available in my country, and was asked by my parents to go get some groceries as they were cooking enchiladas. Here's where it went wrong. I turned off my monitor and made sure it was locked, and didn't turn off my PC fully. I put on shoes and went to my nearby grocery store, just 5 minutes walk, and got the necessary ingredients. When I came home, I went back to my room to find my little brother, who was 11 at the time, on my computer with the camera on and talking to some guy. He had multiple coverings over his face, some type of net-like fabric, and was talking via chat. I freaked out. I found out later he had apparently logged into my PC as he knew my password because he played Minecraft often on my PC, and clicked on a pop-up that led him here, where he was talking to a guy. My older brother defense mode activated, and I got him out of the camera, turned it off, and immediately typed in chat, "We are alerting the authorities, leave immediately." I saw him typing something. His shoulders were moving about as if he was typing on the keyboard, and proceeded to start to leave. As I clicked the confirmation button to leave, I can still remember that exact moment. On the right of the word "confirm to leave," I saw the chat box and was only able to read one word before I left: address. I immediately shut off my computer and put multiple layers of black tape over my camera. I then turned to my brother and asked why he was there and who that guy was, but he started crying as I had raised my voice. My mind was still panicking, as I didn't know how long he was on there, but eventually my parents came and asked why he was crying. I explained the situation, including a brief explanation of what the dark web is, and I saw their faces going white. My stomach felt like it was going to come up any second, and I just sat there for a bit wondering what to do. Eventually, I told my brother what actually happened, including how that man could have found out who we are, our names, our address, etc. Me and my parents called our local authorities, and they said they couldn't do much as that person was anonymous and we have no video of it. Hindsight, I should have taken a photo of the guy before leaving. They sent a patrol car to our house and asked what happened, etc. After the situation calmed down a bit, we were able to convince the authorities to have a patrol car out of our house for the night. I threw out my PC. After that, monitor and all, and still have some anxiety about going on the internet. Hence this throwaway account, and have even made sure that my family's privacy comes first and foremost. I remember not sleeping that night, and staying in my living room watching TV all night. It was probably the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced, and I still have anxiety over internet usage among other things. I genuinely felt in danger, and have never touched the dark web again. Story 5. I wasn't in danger per se, just felt scared as heck. I was at a library browsing because I'd heard stories about the dark web and people finding out where you live, so I was already kind of scared going into it. I went there after school about 3 times a week, trying to find scary stuff. For the first month or so, I didn't find anything interesting. After a while, I stumbled upon a pretty interesting site. It was kind of like Craigslist, but on the dark web. People were selling drugs and, well, themselves. I mostly just enjoyed reading the ads. Some of them were actually pretty funny. I was looking for scary stuff, but instead I found the nicest guy in the world asking if I wanted to buy drugs. The real scary stuff started when a guy sent me a private message. I have no idea how he found me since I hadn't even made a post on the site, so there was no obvious way for him to contact me, but I was a dumbass back then and didn't question it. He asked vague questions about my sexual preferences, and I had a hard time answering because my English wasn't as good as it is now. Also, I was young, so I probably couldn't have answered those questions well in my first language either. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but I guess he liked what I said because he sent me a link, and like a dumbass, I clicked it. I will never forget what I saw. It looked kind of like Facebook on dark mode. The first post I saw there was of an unconscious bare woman who was bleeding a lot in her downtown area. The person who posted it also put a long caption on the picture, but I just remembered the first line: "She screamed like a bitch." I scrolled further fast, trying not to look at the pictures too closely, and realized it was a site where people posted pictures of women they've essayed. I noped out of that site quickly. I closed the browser and the computer, picked up my stuff, and never went back to that library again. Story 6. I was doing some deep browsing and came across a sketchy directory site with thousands of active links. Anyone who's spent time on the dark web knows a lot of those links are dead or expired. But one night, I just felt this urge to actively hunt down some seriously messed up stuff. I stumbled upon a seemingly ordinary Chan website, nothing out of the ordinary at first glance. As I clicked through a few links, one of them led me to a completely different Chan, and what I found there was deeply disturbing. Hundreds of threads filled with thousands of photos of toddlers and young children. The images looked like they'd been taken from people's Facebook pages, personal social media accounts, or even commercial ads. What made it worse was how they talked about the kids, like fairies or pixies, almost obsessively comparing them to mythical creatures. It was incredibly unsettling. I felt uncomfortable for days after that. Story 7. There was this site where you could click a button, and it would take you to a random site. After clicking through for a while, and mostly landing on pointless pages, I clicked the button again and was taken to a black site with a video player. The video started playing, and it was footage from my webcam covering the last 30 minutes. It wasn't live. It was me, scrolling and clicking the button. When I saw the video, I freaked out, but I couldn't look away. I was too curious. So instead, I taped over the webcam and called my brother into the room. Eventually, some carnival-type music started playing, growing louder and more distorted as the video of me played, before abruptly stopping. Some text appeared on the screen, but I honestly don't remember much of it since the words only flashed for a second. What stuck with me was the phrase, "Don't check the bathroom," repeated over and over. My brother told me to just turn it off already, and then a voice responded, "Don't leave," and called his name. I said, "What the F?" And the computer replied again, "Shush, the movie's just getting good." The video then caught up to the moment I first accessed the site. The screen went black, and a cheap jump scare appeared, what looked like ketchup splattered on an Elmo toy, followed by children's laughter. Then my computer crashed. I've never been able to figure out what that even was. Story 8. I have two stories. There used to be a website on the dark web called Silk Road, where loads of drugs were sold, although it got shut down a few years ago. I didn't do any drugs or sell any. I was just bored and decided to browse the site for a while. After about 20 minutes of scrolling, everything suddenly froze, and a message appeared on the screen saying the website had been permanently shut down. The FBI's logo appeared alongside the message, so naturally, I freaked out, imagining the FBI bursting through my door like in the movies. That fear stayed with me for most of the week. Back then, it was a huge deal, as Silk Road was the main place to get drugs on the dark web. Second story. I was on a chat website called Galaxy 3, where people could join groups and talk about various topics. Nothing illegal. Suddenly, a user with no profile picture and a random string of numbers as a name joined our group. He hung around silently for about 10 minutes, then started typing. He said, "You know I can dox you all, right?" We mostly ignored the comment since people often pretend to be hackers. However, when one person sarcastically replied, "Yeah, right," within less than a minute this user pulled up that person's full address, name, and every bit of personal information he could find, whether they were married, if they had children, their names, everything. So, be careful on the dark web, people. Story 9. I may have successfully purchased drugs on the darknet. I followed Google's directions on how to access it using Tor and how to encrypt Bitcoin addresses. The package arrived from outside the US, and I was stoked, excited that I had actually pulled it off. I tested the drugs and everything was great, until I realized I hadn't used a VPN. For about a month after that, I was freaking out. Then one night, I got everything ready for some personal, sexy time. I connected my laptop to my big screen via HDMI and left the laptop open facing me. I turned on my Bluetooth headphones but had some trouble getting them to connect. After a bit of tinkering, I finally got the sound working. I was right in the middle of a diddle-diddle when suddenly the scene on the screen froze. Although the picture froze, I could still hear sounds, loud creaks like boots walking on wooden floorboards. The more I focused, the clearer it became. Then I heard a voice say, "I think he can hear us. He's looking at the camera." My heart dropped. I lunged for the laptop, slammed it shut, unplugged everything, and tossed it aside. Nothing ever came of it, but that experience messed with me for a long time. Story 10. Okay, so I have been genuinely scared only one time. I had been browsing deep web links till I got to a website. This website was all gore and these photos were in decent quality, so it was unsettling. The website at first had already taken a while to load, so I was a little sus already. But after scrolling through the site for a while, my phone started getting slower. So, I decided it was best I should leave the site. Upon doing so, my phone started to speed up, so I turned my screen off and continued to play on my Xbox. After about 5 minutes, my phone was getting spammed with notifications. So, I turned my phone back on and went to my home screen, and that's when stuff started happening. My home screen was all black instead of the background I had before. I thought that was a little weird, but also I didn't have any notifications, even though I kept hearing them. At this point, I was pretty freaked out, so I turned my screen off till it lit up again due to a notification. I tried to swipe up to get to my home screen, but at this point, my phone was unresponsive. I tried swiping down to see my battery life and notifications, but I couldn't do that either. By the way, I have an Android, and at this point, I was really freaked out. Then the scariest part happened. My screen turned on, and I couldn't turn it off, and all that showed was my IP, home address, and me. My camera was showing me. I basically was looking at the fear on my face. I tried holding the power button to turn off my phone, but I couldn't. The only thing that fixed what happened was forcing a factory reset. Luckily, it would be hard for whoever had my info to find me, because this was a month ago and there were lots of restrictions on travel due to COVID. But that is my scariest experience, and I still haven't went back on the deep web since. Story 11. The dark web isn't actually that bad of a place. All the stories you hear about scary cult websites and hitmen are based on websites that are scams. In general, most of the dark web is scams. Turns out when both parties stay anonymous and the money can't be transferred back, lots of people like to scam. Who would have thought? It used to have quite a lot of kitty corn sites though. Luckily, most were taken down, or at least their visibility was strongly reduced. I obviously don't actively look for them, but they used to be pretty common in link lists. The one thing that is still extremely common, but also surprisingly safe, is drug trade. You can still buy whatever drug you want, but for the most part, prices are better than in the real world, as the competition is more direct, and the quality is also better as vendors receive ratings. And poor quality would quickly cause customers to seek out alternatives. So no, I've never felt like I was in danger browsing the dark web. I did once see this horror website with this somewhat disturbing film, but having learnt what I have about the dark web, I am pretty sure it was fake, especially considering the whole website was set up to look scary. Story 12. I haven't felt in danger on the evil internet. Sure, you can find all sorts of stuff that you'd want to report to the police, and yes, some people are definitely in danger. But as long as you stick to the path and don't make yourself an easy mark, you'll be fine. The worst thing I found was a Red Room streaming site. When I got there, they had a countdown for I think about an hour. Naturally, being a 15-year-old boy, I waited around. When it got down to 5 minutes or so, the chat opened. It had around 20 or fewer people in it, and they announced the name of some girl. You could tell only about 5 of those people were there for the blood, and the rest were just kids messing around. Then, when the countdown ended, it prompted me to pay in Bitcoin to see the stream, so naturally, I just went on my merry way. Story 13. Not the dark web, but I used to work for a disabled guy who'd been pretty badly disabled for about 20 years. He spent most of his time gaming and watching films. He was around early on when torrenting and file sharing first started. He even said he topped some lists of the most prolific downloaders worldwide back in the early days. Could be bragging, I don't know. He told me he'd only ever had any issues once. He downloaded a film for his kids, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He was in the habit of checking every film before he let his kids watch, but didn't this time just hit play. He looked up at the screen after a minute or so to see a Snow White-themed kitty corn video playing 1 woman, 7 kids, etc. He didn't go into details or say how much his kids saw, just that he freaked out, exited the file, and then went to the bathroom to throw up. Story 14. When I was 18, I got myself into some serious trouble. No names or links, obviously. One day, I was browsing the site, and showing my friends some crazy stuff I'd found. Fully automatic weapons, explosives, all that. I was about halfway down the second page, when suddenly the browser I was using just closed on its own. After that, everything on my phone shut down completely. I couldn't even send or receive messages. Eventually, it all went back to normal, but I immediately uninstalled every VPN and browser I'd used to access the dark web. About a week later, I noticed some guy in a red car with binoculars watching me at the park while I was with friends. To make it creepier, there was the same red car parked a block from my house. No one ever approached me or said anything, but that was enough to keep me on edge. Story 15. I'm a longtime user of Silk Road and CGMC. I used to have the stuff delivered to my dorm, but the packages never came straight to my room. I always had to pick them up from the dorm's main office. For my third or fourth order from Silk Road, I got an email saying a package had arrived for me. But when I went to pick it up, the RA told me my package was in the Director of Residence's office. I totally freaked out. On top of that, I was suddenly getting a lot of spam calls for some reason, which only made my anxiety worse. I was scared shitless. I didn't go pick it up for about 4 days, even though I kept getting emails from the Director of Residence's office telling me to come get my package. I didn't go because I thought it was a setup, but after a couple of days, I said screw it and went to pick it up. I had paid a lot of bitcoins for that order and really wanted to consume what I had bought. When I got there, I realized I'd been freaking out for no reason. The people holding my order couldn't have been nicer. They didn't even have a good explanation for why the package was sent to their office instead of my dorm. So of course I just kept ordering more. Edit. The package was always delivered by USPS Priority, which is run by the federal government, and I was at a state university. So technically, the federal government was transporting my funny stuff to the state government for me. Story 16. I occasionally check my spam mail folder, and one day I found an email with one of my passwords as the subject line. It definitely caught my attention. When I read it, the message claimed the sender had hacked into my laptop by installing malware the last time I visited a corn site. They said they had a few videos of me that they captured over the last 15 days, including a private soloing video. He said he would forward the videos to everyone in my contacts if I didn't pay him $2,000 in bitcoins. I was sweating for about 10 minutes before I decided to check. I have a bad memory, so I save all my passwords in my browser. When I checked, it turned out the password mentioned in the email subject was an old one I used before. When I checked hibp.com, I realized Yahoo's servers were exploited about 2 months earlier, and this guy might have gotten the password from there. Anyway, there's no point negotiating with a blackmailer. They'll just come back asking for more money next time. So I decided to let it go. I never received another email like that again. Story 17. A creepy dude was watching us through my webcam. Not the dark web, but one time my brother and I were camping and decided to hop on Omegle. Afterwards, we started watching Netflix to fall asleep, but I noticed my webcam light was still on. Neither of us could figure out why. Since the Omegle tab was closed, we tried manually turning off the webcam, but it didn't work. So we decided to open Omegle back up. As soon as we did, we realized some creepy dude had been watching us the whole time. It scared the hell out of us, and he immediately left the chat. Needless to say, we didn't sleep in our tent that night. Story 18. This might not be exactly what you're looking for, but it involves the dark web and someone fearing for their life. My teenage ex-brother-in-law was completely addicted to his computer and constantly exposed himself to awful stuff online. He was also a total a-hole who refused to wear a seatbelt. I was one of the few people who wouldn't back down, and we fought about it all the time. One day, he got in my car and, without any argument, buckled his seatbelt. I asked him what changed. The color drained from his face a bit, and he told me he'd been browsing online when he saw a picture of a girl who didn't wear her seatbelt and got into an accident. Her face was embedded in the steering wheel. From that day on, as far as I know, he never went without a seatbelt again. Story 19. I wasn't on the dark web, but one time my computer screen went black and a small pop-up appeared telling me to call this number. I couldn't get the pop-up to go away even when I shut that bish down. I was dumb at the time and called the number. This Indian guy fixed my computer by gaining control of my mouse. Immediately after all of that, he pulled up my webcam and said to look at myself and see how pretty I am. I was horrified but too scared to just hang up. So, he mentioned Facebook, and before I could say anything, he pulled that thing up on my browser. I said I had to go, but that I would add him. I accepted his friend request with high hopes that he wouldn't steal my identity or some crap. For the longest time, I kept getting a bunch of other Indian dudes trying to contact me through Facebook. Also, that one guy tried to call me a few more times. Eventually, I said screw it and blocked the creep. Who knows where he sold my information, but all I do know is that I keep duct tape over my webcam now. Story 20. Not exactly a dangerous situation, but definitely reckless. My best friend and I decided to order some drugs off the dark web. We were young and had no idea where to get any in real life, so it felt like our only option at the time. Now, here's where it gets interesting. My best friend was interning for the Obama campaign at the time, which in hindsight, made the whole thing so much riskier than we realized. So, we had some leftover Bitcoin and figured, why not? And ordered some Keta too. The drug arrived first, we did it, had our fun, and honestly just completely forgot about the Keta order. Well, the ketamine shows up in a small glass vial inside a plain brown box with no return address. Her parents are the ones who open it, and they absolutely freak out. They assume it's anthrax and that she's the target of a terrorist attack just because she's interning for the Obama campaign. A little dramatic, I know. Her parents go ahead and call the local police, who figure out pretty quickly what it actually is. My friend plays dumb and pretends she has no idea where it came from. Since there's no return address, they can't prove she ordered it. Technically, anyone could send drugs to someone as a setup or blackmail, so there wasn't much they could do about it. Anyways, that happened. Story 21. I kinda hope this gets buried. When I first heard about the dark web, I was too curious not to check it out for myself. I had a vague idea of what Silk Road was, but I really got started on Agora. Back then, Bitcoin was under $200 a coin. I became a dealer almost right away. Agora was something special, trusted by a lot of people. Then Abraxas came along, and turned out to be a solid alternative. I got swallowed up by that world, the rush, the insane revenue potential, and I got hooked on the lifestyle. I moved up the chain, started selling psychedelics, and actually gained a bit of respect for the spiritual work I was doing on the side. Some of my friends would hit up raves and flip Molly. Then spring break came around and everything changed. The crew went down there, but one of us didn't come back. They found 200 Mollies in his car, and the police, along with the DEA, lost their minds. From that point on, we were being watched, followed for months by undercover agents. But the truth is, they only really cared about the Molly. They actually respected my hustle, the whole double life thing, being this low-key psychedelic guru. I got bold, maybe too bold. I even sold it to informants without knowing it. I was never raided, but eventually, I slipped up and got arrested. I lived in a small city, and over the years, I built a reputation. My time in the streets made me recognizable by almost everyone, including the cops I'd run into more than once. Mollies are rare in the States, and getting caught with it, that made people talk. Everyone had wildly different takes on it. Some saw me as reckless, others as misunderstood. As for Agora, it bowed out gracefully. The site shut down due to security concerns, respectfully choosing to disappear rather than risk its users. Everyone else pulled an exit scam, and it was clear that the government had caught up. They could track bitcoins, shut down websites. Nothing was untouchable anymore, except for Alpha Bay. I tried Alpha Bay early on and never really trusted it, but as the competition disappeared, Alpha Bay started investing in itself and quickly became the new powerhouse. I used Alpha Bay for a while. After years of using it, my name started getting hot. Customs was catching on to shipments coming from the Netherlands and other international parcels, so I switched to only receiving mail domestically. My name was definitely hot. I had a few hundred Mollies set to arrive, but they never showed up. Instead, my father got an email from someone at the FBI. I guess they had a vague understanding of their own jobs. I don't know. Basically, they tasked my old man with bringing me into the station for questioning about a matter of national security. So, I went. Turns out, I sold Bitcoin to a terrorist. The interview was surprisingly polite, but they made it clear they'd seen my private Instagram and knew about my underground activities. What they didn't know was why Muhammad sent me $500 6 months ago and what I did with it. So, I showed them the receipt, and that was enough to clear me. They even told me I should consider going into that line of work, and then let me go. After that, I sold more, did more time, and eventually got my head out of my butt. The FBI and DEA basically wiped out the underground market, and now they fuel it. We seriously underestimate our government and the war on drugs. The feds own the deep web. They can track every phone call and text in the world. They can track bitcoins. Nobody is safe. Story 22. I live in a country where privacy isn't really a priority, not just from the government but the people themselves. I got curious about the dark web after watching a few YouTube videos, so I decided to explore it myself. Since I'm a Linux user and know how to cover my tracks using multiple encryptions and VPNs, I felt confident enough. I also run everything inside a VM for extra safety. So, I set up a VM and started exploring. After an hour or two, I got bored and stopped. I closed the VM and went back to my regular daily routine. A week later, I decided to fire up the VM again to continue exploring. But when I did, my wallpaper had changed, along with the icons and other stuff. Then I noticed a text file in the downloads folder, which I knew wasn't mine. When I opened it, it contained my real name, my system information, and even details showing I was using a VM and had other v.m.s installed. I got freaked out, like seriously freaked, and immediately wiped my hard drive clean and changed my ISP. Since then, I haven't dared to go back on the dark web. P.S. This all happened about a month ago, 5 weeks ago, to be exact. Story 23. I once bought 20 pounds worth of weed from the dark web, not realizing it was being shipped all the way from Spain to the UK. It was my first time using a service like that, so I was pretty anxious about the whole thing. After about 2 weeks, an envelope finally arrived, covered in Spanish stamps and labels, but the end was torn open. I immediately thought, oh crap, they know. I pulled out a blank piece of paper, and then out popped a little bag of weed. I guess they figured it was too small to bother with, but I was surprised it didn't fall out during transit, and even more surprised they looked inside and just put it back. Story 24. Just goofing around on random websites with friends, knowing the whole thing was probably overhyped, definitely not like those scary YouTube videos made it seem. But we also knew clicking the wrong thing could mess us up, and yep, it happened fast. We landed on one of those randomized hyperlink sites, kind of like an I'm feeling lucky button, and it took us to a page selling knives. Not too shady, but right after that our computer went haywire. It started opening and closing programs on its own. Weird automated voices played after a reboot, the antivirus freaked out, and the next reboot nearly failed. Thankfully, we managed to fix it by booting into safe mode and running some scans. It was just viruses, but in the moment, with the computer suddenly acting up like that, it was seriously scary. Story 25. I haven't messed with the dark web since around 2012. I used to get things from Silk Road, and everything was fine until the last package, which was a big one. It came all the way from Germany. Once it reached America, it bounced between the same 3 distribution centers or sorting facilities, one of which was in Washington, D.C. It sat there for days. Eventually, it arrived at the post office in my town. I stayed home for days, eagerly waiting for the delivery, but each time the status said they had attempted to deliver it when I wasn't there. This went on for several days, total nonsense. Eventually, they left multiple notices telling me I had to come down to the post office to pick it up. I just imagined them pressing a button as soon as I showed up to claim the package, and then the boys in blue rolling up. No way! I don't live there anymore, or anywhere near there. But I like to think there's still a package full of contraband sitting in their storage somewhere. Story 26. I've written a couple of books about the dark web, which means I've spent a bit of pretty much every day of the past 8 years poking around inside. Over the years, I've spoken with, interviewed, and even met numerous figures from the dark web, mostly drug dealers and operators of darknet markets. I once attended the trial of one of the most notorious individuals I'd ever encountered, Lux, the owner of a certain infamous site. He turned out to be a friendless, unhappy kid who built his evil empire from his childhood bedroom, with his parents blissfully unaware of what was happening under their noses. Despite all my digging around in the darkest corners of the web, the only time I ever felt even remotely at risk was when I helped expose a hitman scam. The owner of Bessa Mafia, once the most profitable hire site in history, didn't take kindly to my reporting. He came after me with a string of threats. "You don't know who I am, but I know who you are and where you live," but I wasn't fazed. Thanks to a helpful hacker who'd given me backdoor access to the site, I knew the truth. He never intended to harm anyone. It was all just smoke and mirrors. It took a bit of a darker turn when he told the people who had signed up to work as hitmen on his site, and who he made video themselves burning cars with signs on them to advertise how legit his site was, then never sent them the promised money for doing so, that I was the owner of the site who had ripped them off. That could have become ugly. But luckily, even the thugs weren't dumb enough to believe him. The only other time I've been a bit nervous was when Homeland Security wanted to have a friendly meeting with me on one of my trips to the US to attend a trial. They were friendly, but scary too. Story 27. I was a casual buyer on the dark web, but over time I got more involved, eventually moving on to ordering slightly bulkier packages of drugs. If you were around back then, you'd know that one market stood above the rest: Alpha Bay. It was the gold standard, often described as the Amazon of drugs and fraud, and for good reason. However, one day, Alpha Bay mysteriously went offline. At first, everyone assumed the admins had pulled an exit scam and vanished with everyone's Bitcoin, which was partly true. But behind the scenes, it had actually been seized by the DEA. In the scramble that followed, users flocked to a new market called Hansa. It had some sketchy design quirks, but at the time, it seemed like the best alternative. As it turned out, the Dutch police had quietly taken control of Hansa with the cooperation of multiple governments. They operated the site for about a month, posing as admins and overseeing over $1 million in drug transactions. All the while, they were quietly collecting data on unsuspecting users, including me, many of whom were using sloppy security practices. It was one of the most effective sting operations the dark web had ever seen. This is when I really started to freak out. Imagine trafficking drugs through the mail, thinking you're being clever, and then the U.S. Attorney General at the time, Jeff Sessions, goes live on national television to announce a major crackdown. He specifically calls out Hansa, revealing that authorities had been gathering user data for over a month. And in the ultimate power move, they shut the site down mid-speech, replacing it with a banner that read, "All purchasers will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." I was crapping myself for a month as many arrests did occur, but luckily I guess I wasn't important enough and nothing happened to me. Story 28. I own a fairly rare car that showed an unusual error code. When I searched for it on Google, I found only one other person who had reported the same issue on the car manufacturer's forum. This guy had spent several months going back and forth between different repair shops and updating the forum thread, trying to find a fix. Everyone in the forum community was pitching in, offering advice and suggestions. I kept reading through the long thread, hoping to see if he ever resolved it. Then suddenly, the updates just stopped. No more replies from him at all. Everyone was scratching their heads for a while. We figured he might have resolved the issue on his own and just didn't think to let us know. Then one day, a news article surfaced about a very wealthy man who had died in a jail cell in Thailand. That's when the pieces started coming together. The make and model of the car mentioned in the article matched his exactly, and both stories placed them in Thailand at the same time. So, what happened was that the same guy who had still been active on the forums suddenly went silent, right around the time the Thai police raided him. It turns out he was actually running one of the largest dark web marketplaces where drugs were being bought and sold. The site was reportedly pulling in around $1 million in revenue per day, and he had been hiding out in Thailand, living in complete luxury. A few days after his arrest, he was found dead in his jail cell. The official story? They claimed it was a self-offing case. I honestly didn't think he was that bright, because the issue he had was something I figured out pretty easily. He just needed to replace the car battery. I think he didn't realize that the 12-volt outlet still stays powered even when the car is off. So, whatever he had plugged into it, like radar detectors or laser jammers, was constantly draining the battery. You have to keep the car on a battery tender if anything's plugged in. My own car started having the same issue because the shop that did the vinyl wrap forgot to hook it up to a battery tender. And once the battery drains to zero, it'll keep having low voltage problems. When that happens, the car won't start unless you jump it. Replacing the battery fixes the whole thing. It took me only a few days to figure that out. This guy? He took months, and it was only like a $600 fix. Story 29. You don't just stumble onto the scary parts of the dark web. You have to be actively searching for something sinister to come across those sites. Even then, gaining access isn't easy, since most of them operate on an invite-only basis. Most of the dark web is just like the regular internet, filled with questionable forums. Think of something like 4chan, but a bit worse, and small-time drug deals. It's really hard to reach the truly criminal parts, unless you have very specific URLs. Even then, the host can choose to deny you access. Story 30. There are hitmen, traffic, snuff films, and things like that, but the vast majority of these sites are just scams asking you to send them Bitcoin. Only a small portion of users on the dark web are actually involved with those kinds of things. However, buying drugs online is quite popular and widespread. Some individual vendors have lifetime sales exceeding $500,000. You use PGP to encrypt your address, so only the drug seller can access your private information. If your package gets seized, law enforcement has no proof you ordered it, unless they also seize your computer and find that information stored on it. To avoid this, many people use Tails or a USB drive to keep their data off the device. Even if your packages get seized, you'll often get a love letter saying what they seized, and there is no follow-up after that. Story 31. I'm not really a dark web user, but I got doxed by a neo-Nazi group there. I ended up having to use the dark web myself, just to track down the websites that had my personal information. The Department of Homeland Security and the FBI showed up at my doorstep because they were threatening to send me letter bombs and send people to abduct and assault me. It was some seriously scary stuff. Thankfully, they all disappeared recently, so I'm just hoping the feds got to them. Story 32. No, the dark web is actually not very exciting, and it's very hard to use. The only danger you are in is getting a visit from the law after trying to buy drugs online. Edit. The deep web consists of non-indexed sites, while the dark web refers to non-indexed sites that often require Tor and frequently offer illegal content. The dark web isn't very exciting for most people because a lot of what you might find is actually honeypots set up by law enforcement. To access the deep or dark web, you need a specific address. You can't just Google it. Most addresses you find on the clear net are likely compromised. If you're savvy enough, you might find a place to buy drugs online and actually receive them, assuming the package isn't intercepted by the mail service. Any hitman or contract killer services you come across are almost certainly honeypots. And you can find videos of people passing on the clear net. You don't need the dark web for that. Story 33. I actually learned how to access the dark web by listening to NPR. They had a segment where an author writing a book about it basically gave step-by-step instructions on how to do it. I followed everything he said, and by golly, it worked. Truthfully, it was pretty underwhelming. Mostly just drugs and counterfeit items like passports and money. I did come across some weapons with the serial numbers scratched off, pistols and shotguns, but nothing that would start World War III. I also saw a couple of ads for hitmen, but they seemed pretty hokey and were most likely undercover cops. I never felt in danger, but I have never gone back because there's nothing I really want from there. No government agents have kicked down my door either. Story 34. I've used the dark web once or twice. The scariest moment was when my screen went black for a few moments and then came back on. It wasn't anything serious, just my display cable acting up, but it definitely gave me the creeps. As for dark or disturbing stuff, I only found a list of random addresses. The dark web really has a lot of stigma around it. For the most part, it's just people curious about the dark web, or folks trying to scam you or sell drugs. You have to dig pretty deep to find the really messed up stuff. Honestly, you're more likely to come across dark web type content on Reddit or YouTube than on the actual dark web itself. Story 35. The deep web isn't scary. Just don't give out any personal information, and you're good. The best story I have from visiting the deep web is that I joined a Lord of the Rings fan site, something like the Shire or the Hobbit Hole. Yes, you can find some bad stuff there, but it's mostly just drugs. The main reason you shouldn't buy anything on the deep web is because it's most likely a scam. They'll just take your money and run. You can find more disgusting stuff on the clear web than you can on the deep web. There's just so much stuff that it's impossible to find it all. Story 36. I never felt in danger using the darknet, but I did almost lose everything to it. I started back in the Alpha Bay days, then moved on to Dream, and eventually Empire, which, to my knowledge, is still operating to this day. I ordered everything and anything, mostly out of curiosity. I wouldn't say I had a problem with anything in particular until the day I ordered crystal meth. Fast forward a few years later, and I was slamming it and using every day. I almost chose it over my wife and 2 beautiful boys. No one was the wiser. Besides, eventually, my wife. No one at work knew. For the most part, I was pretty good at hiding my use, although I feel like I would have been caught eventually. 69 days sober today. I still struggle, but life is better. Story 37. I don't go to dark web, but there was an instance in my country, Philippines, regarding an Australian expat named Peter Scully. He ran a pay-per-view video stream of SA with his girlfriends and kiddies. The Philippines has an insidious, almost invisible problem with kitty S-work due to the rampant poverty, but this case shook so much people for how deplorable his methods were. Daisy's destruction was a video he made that sold for $10,000. He is serving lifetime in a Philippine prison. I hope the inmates beat him up every day. Story 38. I've been on the dark web, and honestly, it's really hard to come across illegal or scary stuff unless you're actively looking for it. However, I would argue that you're more likely to come across illegal or sick content on the surface web by accident. Just look at all those gore posts on social media. One time, I was on about page 20 of Google looking for a specific abandonware program. I forgot what it was. Suddenly, I got a pop-up for kitty corn. I don't even want to describe it. Compared to others, I'm usually pretty tolerant of certain things, but that made me throw up and even cry. I was so scared. Who knows who runs that site, what malware it might have had, and the fact that my ISP could have seen it. I thought agents might come bust down my door any second. Thank God that never happened, and I'm glad the content didn't traumatize me. My only regret is not reporting the site. I was in such shock that I just unplugged my computer and ran. Basically, don't set go on page 20 of Goggle. Story 39. I once got hit with a really poorly made computer virus. It was based on TeamViewer by the looks of it. I got the virus from a download link, but I can't remember what I was trying to download, probably some kind of audio editing program if memory serves. As soon as the download was done, the virus activated, and it looked like something from an old version of TeamViewer. The mouse started moving on its own, so my immediate reaction was to disconnect my internet cable. I then shut the virus down from Task Manager and converted the file to a text file. Despite having no experience with programming at the time, even I could tell that it was made by a complete beginner. Most of the thing was blocks of code copy-pasted into it randomly and connected by a few lines of code, and copious use of goto was an absolute mess. It did get me interested in programming though, so I think the experience was a net positive. Story 40. So, I'm 56 years old and have never stumbled into the dark web, thank God. I just spent more time than I should have reading about the ghastly videos that apparently thousands of you have seen, mostly by accident, and mostly when you were young children. Every single one of you noted how damaging the images and sounds were to you, and for many of you, that damage lingered. I'm especially saddened to read about those of you who were sweet innocents, just trying to have fun, who were ambushed by this unimaginable horror. Who knows how it changed you? I'm very grateful that the internet didn't exist when I was a child. Not that the videos described are any easier to process as an adult, but still, and I'm sitting here wondering how much of the anxiety disorders, depression, and lack of resilience and compassion that I see in our society are linked to what I'm reading here. It's really frightening to ponder, especially as this Reddit question, with over 7,000 comments, is only the tiniest tip of the iceberg. For those of you with young children, as a former college professor and a parent myself, here's my unsolicited advice. Know your children. Pay close attention to their emotional development and behavior. Foster open, non-judgmental, and safe relationships where they feel secure in the knowledge that they can come to you about anything. Because in today's world, there's really no way to completely prevent them from encountering horrible images and videos before they're emotionally ready to process them. Be safe out there. Story 41. Usually, the biggest danger on the dark web is your own mistakes. If you take the necessary precautions, you'll likely be fine, unless you get caught up in a scam. That said, there was one time I clicked on a link that seemed trustworthy at first. Everything appeared normal. Then suddenly the screen exploded into flashy images with a video, but nothing else happened. I thought, alright, just some edgy website design, let's see where this goes. My hand hovering over Ctrl+W. Then, out of nowhere, my file folder opened, and I was prompted to verify the installation of a file with a name in Russian. I noped right out of there and shut my PC down for the day. Story 42. There are some forums on the dark web I used to participate in. At some point, I must have jokingly given my address as the address of the headquarters of a controversial political party in my country. Long enough after doing so to have forgotten, someone PM'd me with threats, including saying, "I know where you live." I was a little bit spooked, but decided I'd ask for my address then to call their bluff. The response back was something along the lines of, "You think I'm just messing with you and the city and province where I lived?" Now I was really freaking out. How could someone know all this? But on the flip side, this is the biggest city in the country. So, hands shaking, I asked for my full address. Sure enough, they gave the office address of this political party. Dude hadn't even taken 30 seconds to check whether this was a residential address. I nearly pissed myself laughing. Story 43. I was trying to buy some redacted off the dark web before it got taken down by the CIA and Interpol. Except not joking. I barely made the cut. If you check sites that track the status of deep web marketplaces, there sets even a warning saying, "Site has been seized by agencies." I bought from a new seller with mixed reviews, shame on me, and figured it was worth the $50 in Bitcoin. A few days later, I got a letter with no return address. Inside was just a slip of paper that said something like, "Your information has been recorded, and is part of the largest internet sting operation in history. Send $100 in Bitcoin to deep web address, or we will reveal your information to the DEA, FBI, and CIA. You have 48 hours to respond." Being green to the dark web stuff, I freaked the F out. I called my best friend, who told me that scams like that were super common and that I should just ignore it, because what I was buying wasn't nearly enough to attract federal attention. From that moment on, I stuck with only the highest-rated sellers. Story 44. Unfortunately, the dark web isn't really as dangerous as people often think. The hitman and traffic sites are usually scams, and most darknet markets are pretty straightforward. You pay for drugs, receive the product, and then leave a review. Very few people ever venture far enough into the dark web to be in actual danger, and even fewer would go so far as to put a stranger at risk. The only real threats I've come across are on message boards, where angry dealers sometimes ask others to rough someone up or dox them in an attempt to harm or intimidate them. It's a hard concept for some people to grasp, but the dark web is simply content that isn't indexed by regular search engines. In fact, most dark websites, about 99%, aren't inconspicuous at all. Only a very small fraction exist for the perverted or illegal purposes you often see portrayed in movies. Story 45. The year was 2011. I lived in a South Asian country where the internet was still fairly new. At the time, I was 15 years old and already knew about the dark net. Back then, mobile phones weren't very advanced, and computers were quite rare. However, cyber cafes did exist. For those who don't know, they were shops that rented out PCs with internet access by the hour. After gathering all the information I could on the dark web, I downloaded the Tor browser and started exploring some onion sites. I spent the whole summer doing this, and one time I stumbled upon a site that claimed it would kill anyone you wanted and only take the money after the job was done. I thought it was fake and sketchy, so I decided to order a bounty on myself. I wrote that the death had to look like an accident, and after proof, I would pay $600. Note, I was unemployed. I even posted my photo just to be sure. My dad had a 2-megapixel phone back then. 2 days later, I was in a serious accident. It was very bad. I broke my back and ended up in the hospital for 6 months. At that time, I was really scared someone was coming to kill me, but that never happened. Now I'm 23 years old, and looking back, I know it was a dumb thing to do, but I still remember that moment in the hospital vividly. As for the website, I think it was either a hoax or no one was interested in my bounty. To this day, I still don't know what happened to my photo. Story 46. This isn't specifically dark web related, but when I was about 12 years old, I used to download games and software illegally on my family computer, like many people do. On 2 occasions, after downloading and installing some software, it didn't work properly, so I tried to uninstall it. I thought I had removed it completely, but apparently, I didn't do a thorough job. About a week later, while I was on the computer, I noticed the camera light turn on, something that only happens when the camera is in use. Instantly, I covered the camera with my finger, knowing something was wrong. After about 20 seconds, a text window popped up and started typing. I don't remember the exact words since this happened about 10 years ago, but it said something like, "Hey, I can't see you. Where are you?" Another 20 seconds passed, and the message said, "I can hear your fan." I was too freaked out to move. The messages continued for a bit. Then the window ha-ha'd a few times, did a weird glitchy shake, and disappeared. The camera light went off. I completely wiped the computer right after that. Story 47. The whole dark web hype is massively overblown. It's kind of like the satanic panic of the 1980s, just a modern-day boogeyman. What bugs me is how everyone rallies behind VPN companies, but hardly anyone really champions Tor. Even though VPNs often mislead you with their ads, your ISP can still see the sites you visit, whereas Tor or networks like I2P, which uses garlic routing instead of Tor's onion routing, make it impossible for your ISP to track your browsing history. You gotta pay for VPNs, but Tor is completely free. Basically, Tor is like a free, better version of services like NordVPN. The dark web myth? It's mostly smoke and mirrors, no real fire behind it. I use Tor as my default browser too, and I've downloaded tons of stuff from engine sites without ever feeling unsafe. The whole dark web myth feels like it was partly cooked up by big internet companies trying to discredit Tor and the Tor project, the non-profit behind it, for their commitment to privacy. What's cool is that the Tor project actually encourages people to try and crack Tor so they can fix vulnerabilities and make it even more secure. It's kind of like nuclear energy. The disasters like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island get all the attention, making people fear it. But if you look beyond the hype, nuclear energy is incredibly efficient and beneficial. Same with the dark web, all those drug marketplaces. Most are FBI honeypots, and if any real ones pop up, they get shut down fast. The scary stories don't tell the full picture. Exactly, you'd have to go way out of your way to even stumble onto the fake marketplaces. During Operation Onimus, which famously included the arrest of Ross Ulbricht, Andrew Luman from the Tor project pointed out that law enforcement's claims were overblown. The main technique they used was tracing Bitcoin transactions, not breaking Tor itself. Meanwhile, a Europol official said, "This is something we want to keep for ourselves. The way we do this, we can't share with the whole world, because we want to do it again and again and again." That's a pretty clear contrast, right? They want to make it seem like using Tor is criminal, even though it's perfectly legal. I've even heard people say that simply using Tor is illegal, which is total nonsense. And about those hitman sites, not a single legit one has ever been found. Every so-called hitman marketplace has been hilariously fake or outright scams. The whole thing is mostly a myth, fueled by sensationalism. Exactly. Red rooms are basically a running joke in the Tor and cryptography communities because there's zero credible evidence they actually exist. They're more urban legend than reality. Even Ross Ulbricht got caught up in a scam involving one of these fake setups. This guy pretended to be 3 different people: a vendor on Silk Road, that vendor's supplier, and a gangster from Canada who was supposedly going to kill the supplier. Turns out, the same scammer was behind multiple accounts, including an infamous vendor who pulled similar cons. Ulbricht ended up losing around $730,000 to this con artist. Ironically, the scammer was later arrested during Operation Anonymous. It just goes to show how much deception there was even within those underground circles. And all the things you hear about kitty corn? Same thing as with the drug marketplaces, FBI honeypots, and fake scam sites. So please, stop spreading lies. The dark web you hear about is not real. In fact, you should pick up Tor or I2P and Freenet for yourself. It's completely free and easy to use, and it helps millions. And I even think it's sad, a bit of time after Bitcoin was released and the white paper was made, Bitcoin became associated with hackers after it started being used by WikiLeaks due to them being dropped by multiple payment systems. However, just months later, Bitcoin and other miners' coins completely exploded in 2013. People love an anonymous currency, but an anonymous browser? That's dangerous in many people's eyes. Look past the sensationalism and see the truth. Tor will forever be stuck in the criminals and hackers stage that Bitcoin was in for about a year, which is extremely sad. The amount of misinformation the average person is spoon-fed by sensationalist media outlets about Tor is short of mind-blowing. Pick up Tor. Start caring about your privacy. Look into Tor and the facade of hackers and criminals quickly disappears. Story 48. Be safe, everyone. Don't give out your personal information or communicate with strangers. If you're planning to buy anything, use a secure Linux operating system like Tails. Always use private keys, connect through a public Wi-Fi spot, not your home, and encrypt all your messages. Use multi-signature markets to reduce the risk of losing your Bitcoin, and preferably use escrow services. Never send your Bitcoins directly from a wallet linked to you straight to the seller. Always tumble your coins first, and when your package arrives, don't open it for a few days. A friend shared all this with me and told me I should pass it along to help you guys out. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.